Hello wonderful people! Today I'm going to show you how you can draw your own version of this little sleepy cat. And I will be working in Procreate, but you can follow along with any digital art software of your choice. And all you need to follow along this video is a basic round brush, so the most simple brush you have in your software, and a drawing brush that you know you're comfortable with. But don't worry, I'm going to give you tips on finding those brushes as we go throughout the video. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So this video is entirely customizable. You can obviously change the color of the cat and change the color of the books, change the element next to the cat if you want to make the piece your own. That being said, if you want to follow along with exactly what I will be drawing, I included a free color palette that you can download. It will be linked in the description below and it comes with my bundle of freebies. So feel free to pause the video here to go ahead and download that. And just a quick note, if you are working in Procreate like I am, after this video goes up, maybe 30 minutes or so afterwards, I will post a part 2 of the video in which we're going to animate the sleepy cat. So if you would like to create the animation, it's super easy. Make sure that when you customize the piece, you still keep the same layer structure as what I will have in my file. But for now, we're just going to start with a rough sketch. So the first step here is going to just do a super rough sketch, mapping out the basic shape so we're happy with the base structure before we start adding the colors. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my example here, and then we're going to create a new layer. We're going to rename this new layer to Sketch. And really for the sketch, you can use any color of your choice because we're not going to see it in the final result. I just like to sketch with a pretty neutral gray, so that's what I'm going to go for. And similarly with the brush, we're not going to see the sketch in the final result. So as long as you're comfortable with the brush, that's really all that matters. But I'm going to give you a few suggestions, of course. So if you are working with Procreate, a great option would be in the sketching pack that comes with the app, the HB pencil. If you're working in a different software, again, anything you're comfortable with or a brush that has the word pencil in its name should work really well. But in my case here, I'm going to go with a brush from my illustration bundle, the Ultimate Illustration Bundle in the texture pack, the sketching brush. These brushes are not essential at all, don't worry, but if you do want to check them out, they will be linked in the description below and there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people, but again, not essential at all. Now, no matter which brush and no matter which color you're using, we're going to start with just a small circle for the head. So very quick, as you can see, I say circle, but honestly, it's more of a blob. And then we're going to draw a circle that is a little bit bigger, which is going to be the body. So we want the bottom of both circles to roughly align because the cat is resting on something. But the body is obviously going to be, taller than the head. Now from there, we're going to draw the arms of the cat, so the front paws, and those are going to be super simple. They're just going to be long sausages. So we're going to have one long sausage that starts from the body and end a little bit beyond the head. And then the other one would be behind the head and the body. So we're just going to see a little bit of the paw poking out right here. Now the back legs are going to be super easy. They're kind of hidden under the body. So we're going to see the hip and the thigh, which is going to be just this kind of oval on the bottom right of the body circle. And then we're going to have a smaller sausage, which is going to be essentially the foot. Now from there, we're going to refine the head and the face because right now it doesn't really look like a cat at all. And for that, you have a few different things that you can refine, meaning you can completely transform the type of cat you're drawing by just changing the base shape of the head. So you could keep it as a circle if you want. You can make it more square if you want to have a cat that looks a little bit more like a stray cat or an older cat. In my case here, I want to have something that looks a little bit cuter, like a kitten. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to add some cheeks to my base circle. So I'm going to, roughly in the middle, if I divide this circle in two halves, roughly, start there and extend this bottom section to create the cheeks. Now the ears are also something you can easily customize. I'm going to go with very simple triangle ears. That being said though, I might flatten the top of the head a little bit, so instead of having this curve, just connecting the area between the ears with a flat, straight line. And now that we have that, we can also draw or sketch the facial features. So following the middle horizontal line that we have here, we're also going to add a vertical line. And that's always really helpful to draw this plus sign because it's going to give you a lot of information on where to place your facial features. So for example, I like to place the nose right below the intersection of both lines. So that's what I'm going to do here for the cat. I'm going to draw a small triangle. Then the mouth is just going to follow that vertical axis. So in the case of a cat here, I'm going to go with essentially a flattened W. So I'm going to have this kind of little curve, and then that comes up to the nose. And same thing on the other side. And the eyes are just going to be along this horizontal line, so you could have open eyes. You could have these kind of U shapes for the eyes. I want my cat to look extra happy, so I'm going to have the flipped version of the U shapes. Maybe adding an extra smaller little squishy line here right under the main one. Yeah, I think that's cute. Now before I draw the tail, I want to sketch roughly what the cat is going to be resting on so that I know how to draw that tail. So in my case, I'm just going to have the cat rest on some books, but you could have it rest on a table, on cushions, really whatever you want. You're just going to roughly sketch the shape at this point. So in the case of book, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the books be slightly angled. So I'm going to draw a rectangle in the front. And then a slightly angled rectangle on the side. Now, one thing to note here, you don't want to have, when I say a slightly angled rectangle, you don't want to have a rectangle with those kind of edges. That doesn't work with the perspective. Instead, we're going to have 3 vertical lines right here. Then to finish the book, all you have to do is just bring in this corner into a horizontal line behind the cat, and bring in this corner with the same, roughly the same angle as this one, also behind the cat. Oops. There you go. So we're going to repeat, or at least I'm going to repeat these steps to create 2 more books, and I'm going to have them be slightly staggered. Now from there I have the information I needed to draw the tail, so I'm just going to come back in and follow the shape of the back to draw the right side of the tail. So really just following the back and then creating this kind of S-curve right down to the ground. And then drawing the inside is just going to be following the same curve, but a little bit more towards the left and a little bit lower. Now just to make the piece a little bit more interesting, I'm also going to add a teacup on the right, but you could have something completely different. I just feel like this is a bit, I don't know, the composition is not optimal. It's kind of really a big block. So adding something on the side is just going to help the piece flow a little bit more. So what I'm going to do here for the cup is I'm going to start with just a big U shape, and I'm going to have the cup be hidden a little bit behind the books and the cat. So the start of the U shape is going to be, well, behind the books. But then it's going to come around. And then I'm going to draw an oval on the top of the cup, which is going to be the opening of the cup. And another oval under the cup for the plate. Now we can also refine it to make it look more like a cup. So you could add, for example, a handle. You could add another curved line on the top section to show the liquid that is in the cup. And you could add a tea bag. So for the tea bag, you would follow the bottom edge of the opening of the cup. And then you're going to draw a slightly curved line for the string. And whatever shape you want for the actual little label that comes with the tea packet. So what I like to start with is just a trapeze, like a very simple little trapeze here. And then under that trapeze is just a normal rectangle or square. Now, I know that it looks absolutely crazy right now. It's a case of trusting the process for sure, but there is a reason that I like to sketch everything very quickly and roughly before moving on to the colors. And you've probably heard me say that multiple times if you watch my tutorials, but if not, the reason I like to draw with basic shapes like this before moving on to the colors is so that I can make sure I'm super happy with the structure, the proportions, and the positioning of all the different elements before I spend a lot of time working on colors, shading, details, and stuff like that. So essentially what I mean here is if you're working in a digital art software, you always have the opportunity to use selections and then move the different elements you've selected around to create or to change your illustration. And because we're working with basic shapes, it's super easy to do. Let's say, for example, I want a slightly bigger head. What I can do is just use my selection tool right here, setting it to freehand so that I can draw whatever section I want and just draw a section around the base shape of the head. Then from there, I can use any kind of transformation tool I have. So in Procreate, it's the arrow tool here. And I can just resize, rotate, move along, or move around, I should say, those basic shapes until I'm super, super happy with my basic structure. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to rework your base sketch. It doesn't need to look good in the sense that it doesn't need to look clean, but you need to be happy with the basic composition and basic proportions of the sketch. Great, so once you're happy with your rough sketch, we're going to start mapping out the different colors. And we're going to do that by just blocking the main colors for the main elements on separate layers. And this stage is pretty much like you were working with a coloring book, so it's really not super complicated. I would argue the sketch was probably by far the hardest part of this entire tutorial. So if you made it this far, you can for sure get it to the end. Now we're going to start by just, again, like I mentioned, mapping out the basic shapes on different layers. And so the first shape we're going to map out is just going to be the shape of the cat. So go ahead and create a new layer, put it under the sketch, and rename that new layer to cat. Now the cat is a very easy thing to customize. We might have customized the shape already, but the color is even easier to customize. So I will personally be working with just a very simple gray. In the color palette, it is this one right here. You can see it's not a fully neutral gray. It does have a little blue in it just to make the color look a little bit more vibrant and interesting. But you could go a completely different color if you want. And once we're done mapping out the basic shapes, I'm also going to show you how you could quickly change the colors to experiment with a different palette if you're not super happy with what you started with. But for now, again, I'm just going to go with this gray right here in the color palette for the cat. And at this stage, we're going to map out everything using a super simple round brush. So what I mean by that is a brush that is a circle and doesn't have any texture within the circle or doesn't have any feathering, so no gradient on the edges of the circle. So if you're working with Procreate, that brush is going to be in the airbrushing pack that comes with the app. It's called the hard brush right here. If you're working in a different software, it's probably just the most basic brush you have in your software, like a round brush or hard brush. Usually those would be the name to look for. That being said, if you do have my illustration bundle, we are going to pick from the texture pack, if I can find it, the base round brush right here, the second option. And the goal is really just going to be outlining the whole shape of the cat and then filling it in to create a silhouette. So for that, the size of the brush you use doesn't matter at all as long as you have good control over it. Now, depending on the color you are using for the cat, it might be hard to see what you're drawing underneath the sketch. So if that's the case, there are a few different things that you can do to make your sketch still visible, but not quite as in the way. So first thing would be lowering the opacity of the sketch, which you can do in Procreate by tapping on the little N next to the check mark right here, and playing with the opacity slider until you can just barely see the sketch. Now I'm going to keep mine a little bit more dark so you can see it in the video, but in any case, really lower the opacity until you can just barely see the sketch. Another thing that you can do, especially if you're working with darker colors like I will be working with, especially the background, is use a blending mode for your sketch. Now, blending modes are available in most software, and usually they are with the opacity slider, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. And you're going to look for a blending mode called multiply or linear burn. And without getting into too many details about blending modes, essentially it's just going to take the sketch and it's going to change the darkness of the sketch based on the color that is behind it. So if I show you an example, if I go back on my cat layer here, when I draw, the sketch is darker whenever it's over a dark color and it's lighter when it's over a light color. So all of that to say, make your sketch just not quite as intense. If you feel the need to, then go back on your cat layer and with any sized brush you're comfortable with, outline the whole shape of the cat so that we can later fill it in and create a silhouette. If you are enjoying this tutorial so far, please consider helping the channel by giving this video a like and subscribing if you haven't already. Now, I know everyone on YouTube is asking you to do that, but believe it or not, it does help us and our channels a lot because it just tells YouTube to take the video and show it to more people. So thanks for helping. Now once you have the whole outlines, you can just drop in your color to fill it in and create the silhouette. And when you do create your silhouette, you're probably going to notice that the sketch might have looked fine and the outline might have looked fine, but there is something you want to tweak. For example, I feel like the top of the head right now on my cat is way too flat. So creating silhouettes like this is just going to give you a different perspective on your sketch. So it's also a good idea here to make sure you take the time to, well, play with your silhouette until you're super, super happy with it. So feel free to pause the video if you need to, otherwise we're just going to go through all the different shapes we have, creating different layers with different colors. So the next thing I'm going to work on is the books, and I'm going to use the same technique, so I'm just going to create a new layer. This time I'm going to put the layer behind the cat or below the cat because the books are under the cat and the cat is hiding them. And I'm going to rename this new layer to Book 1. So for the first book, I'm just going to go with blue. In the color palette, it is this one right here at the top. Otherwise, exact same thing, I'm just going to create an outline. But the book here, I want to see some of the paper on the side. So I'm going to make sure I remember that when I create my outline, essentially, by, well, leaving a bit of a gap for the pages. So it's going to look like this. Might also curve the edges of the book or the spine, the top and the bottom. That's definitely optional, but I just like that vibe in general for books. Then filling that in. And just coming back in here, the spine or the cover is going to be usually a little bit longer than the pages. So that's kind of what I did here in my sketch. I went a little bit further out than the original vertical line I had. But I need to draw the cover going back on this underside. So instead of just having the straight line, I'm essentially going to create this little triangle right here. Now, because I'm going to have a dark background and not a white background, I'm also going to actually draw the pages. So I'm just going to hide my background layer for now so that I can see what I'm about to do. Otherwise, still on my book 1 layer here, I'm going to come in with a light gray. So in the color palette, I'm going to pick, let's go with this one right here on the top of this third column. It's almost white, but it does have a little bit of gray and a little tiny bit of blue in it. Otherwise, all I'm going to do is I'm going to close that line here, which will be the pages. and then fill in that space. Now you could, if you want to, just repeat these steps on the other books, or you can just create a copy of this layer that we already have. So to do that in Procreate, super easy. You just swipe your layer towards the left with one finger, and you select duplicate right here. Then you're going to pick the bottom copy, and you're going to change it to book 1 to book 2. And with your arrow tool, you're just going to reposition the book where you want it to be. I'm going to just reactivate my background here so I can see the sketch a little bit better, and then repeat it one more time for book 3. So duplicating book 2, picking the bottom copy, renaming the copy to book 3, and using the arrow tool to move the new book copy. And for now, I'm just going to leave all the books the same color, but at the end, when we're done mapping out all the basic shapes, I'm going to show you again how you can recolor things by using the books as the example. For now though, I'm going to finish up this basic color blocking by sketching, or by color blocking I should say, the cup. So just creating a new layer, putting it below book 3, and renaming that new layer to cup. Now again, the cup, you could completely customize the color. I'm going to use the same grayish blue that I used for the pages. And so once more, so I can see what I'm doing, I'm just going to hide the background color. And here I'm really just going to do the whole cup, just a big white silhouette. I'm not going to bother, or I'm not going to worry, I should say, about the little tag here or the liquid within the cup. Now one thing though, make sure that you close the shape, otherwise it's going to fill in the entire canvas. So if you're not sure how to do that, you can just temporarily deactivate your different books and cat layer, and on the cup layer just come in and close your outline so that you can come back in and fill in your silhouette. So once more, feel free to take all the time you need to play with the different base shapes. I'm noticing, for example, here I forgot that I need to have a hole in the handles. I'm just going to come back in and erase that, maybe refine the top. So just pause the video, and once you're super happy with your base shapes, I'm going to show you how you can tweak the different colors you have to make sure you're super happy with your color palette. Awesome. So before we move on to working on the background, the details, and the shadows, I want to quickly show you how you could change the colors of the different elements by using 2 different techniques. The easiest one is probably just color dropping a color and recoloring an element. Because everything is on separate layers, that works super well. So for example, what I mean by that is that if I wanted to change the color of book 2, I could just select my book 2 layer here and pick a different color in the color palette, for example, the green right here, and then just drop that color on the book to recolor it. Now, because we do have the pages on the same layer, you could keep it like that, honestly, if you wanted to, or you could adjust what is called the threshold. And to do that, all you have to do is just keep your pencil on the screen when you drop your color, and then move your pencil towards the left if you want to decrease the amount of what is getting colored. Oops. Until it doesn't like the pages, or towards the right if you want to increase the amount of what is being colored. So in my case, I would have to set it to around 27%, and that way it only recolors the cover and not the pages. So I'm going to do that for the other book as well. This one is going to be yellow, right here in the color palette. There we go. Another method you would have to change the colors is to use a filter. So if you don't have a color palette, or if you're just exploring when you're creating your own color palette, that is a great tool. And that is the tool I use whenever I'm creating illustrations before I start teaching them on YouTube. So for example here, if I was working on my books and I said, you know what, I'm not sure of that green. What I could do is just select my book 2 layer, the green one, and go and find my color layer adjustment tools. So in Procreate, that is in the adjustment panel here at the top. My favorite one is hue, saturation, brightness, although you could work with pretty much any one that you like color balance could work really well. Curves, not so great for that kind of purpose, but you could also work with curves. That being said, again, hue, saturation, and brightness is my favorite, and it's available in most software, so you should be able to find it. And that tool is going to open up 3 sliders: hue, saturation, and brightness. And the hue is going to allow you to play with what we usually call the color. So let's say here I didn't want a green, maybe more of a pink, that could look good. So it's really just going through and playing with the slider and see if there's something that you like more than the original color you picked. Same thing, you could play with the saturation. So if you move the saturation towards the left, your color is going to be more gray. And towards the right, it's going to be more vibrant, so more colorful. And lastly, here we have the brightness. So towards the left, it's darker, and then towards the right, it's lighter. So if you're trying to customize your illustration, or if you just want to experiment with a different color palette, feel free to pause the video here and use these 2 techniques to play with the different colors you have. And once you're done with that, we're going to meet up in the next chapter, which is going to be creating a quick background. Awesome, so once you're happy with your color palette, we're going to create a super quick background. I'm going to keep mine really simple. I'm just going to have a table and a wall, that's it, but you could have something more intense, of course. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start by setting one uniform color for the background. So if you're working in Procreate, there's always a background color layer that comes within any canvas that you create. So you could just go ahead and select that and then use that for your color. Otherwise, if you're working in a different software, just go ahead and create a new layer, put it below everything you have so far, and rename that new layer to background. Again, in my case, I'm working in Procreate, so I'm just going to reactivate my background here. I'm going to tap on it, and I'm going to select a really dark gray blue color. So in the color palette, it is right here. It's really hard to see, I bet, in the video, but trust me, it's right here. And you can see it's not quite black, almost. Not quite there, and it has a little bit blue in it, just to tie in with the cat itself and the kind of whites that we have that also have that blue tinge in it. Now from there, I'm going to create a gradient, so just a line with a gradient, and that's going to make it look like there's a table, and then behind the table, a wall. So go ahead and create a new layer, put it below everything you have so far, except for the background, of course, and rename that new layer to, let's just go with wall shadow. Now the wall shadow is going to be super easy to create. We're just going to pick a darker version of our background color. So in the color palette, it's even harder to see, I bet, but it's right under the one we just picked right here. It's a little bit more blue and also a little bit more black. And then with the same brush we've been using, which is just a basic round brush, we're going to draw a line, horizontal line, which is going to be where the table ends. So I'm going to have it cross in the middle of my green book here. Kind of like this. I hope you can see what I'm doing in the video. If not, I'm going to find a way to show you a little bit better. And if you're working with Procreate, there's a really neat trick that you can use to draw a straight line. When you're drawing your line first, just keep your pencil on the screen so it creates a straight line. And then if you come back in and tap with another finger, it's going to make it perfectly horizontal. Now once you have that, we're just going to fill in the top section with our darker color. And we're going to come back in with a soft eraser to erase the top corners to create more of a gradient than this super blocky shapes. So super basic eraser once more, just the most basic soft brush you have in your software. If you're working with free Procreate brushes, that would mean going in the airbrushing pack that comes with the app and picking the soft brush. If you're working in different software, soft brush should be the name you're looking for. It's just a round brush, still doesn't have any texture in it, but it has this feathering on the edges that creates a gradient. So I'm going to work with the soft brush that comes with Procreate. I think it works perfectly fine for this. We're going to make it medium to big size, the exact size doesn't matter. And we're going to come in and just lightly erase the top corners to create a gradient. So the top corners should be lighter, and then the closer we get to the cat, the darker it should be. I think my brush was a little bit too big. Yeah, there we go. So again, I hope you can see in the video, if I was to go ahead and just hide this background color layer, or just set it to white temporarily, you're going to see what I mean. We're creating this kind of soft gradient at the bottom of this wall area. Now, I'm not going to spend any more time on this step because I know it's hard to see, and honestly, again, I just want to keep the background super simple, but feel free to pause the video and take more time if you want to have something a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more interesting than just a dark gray for your background. Great, so now that we have our basic shapes and our background, we're going to come back in and we're going to start adding some outlines and some shading to make the piece a little bit, well, less boring. Now we're going to do that in more of a painterly style than what I usually do. And so what I mean by that is I'm just going to pick one brush and then I'm going to color pick the different colors I have, make them darker, make them lighter, and really essentially work just like I would be working with a regular coloring pencil. So the goal here is to not have this look too digital. That being said, if you have a method that you like for shading, for example, the method that I teach in most of my other videos, which is using one color and then a blending mode, you could totally go ahead and do that. But here, I want this almost traditional feel to the piece. So we're going to start with the cat because it's the main element here in the piece. So we're just going to go back on the cat layer here. And we are going to start by adding maybe some markings on the cat. So in my case, I want it to be gray with some white details and some darker gray stripes. So I'm going to start with the white details. I'm going to pick the same white that I used for the pages, again, just because I want everything to tie in nicely. But you could completely customize these markings very, very easily. One thing I would suggest though is using, if that's available to you in your software, what is called alpha lock on your layers so that you can draw within the base shape we have without having to worry about staying or spilling outside of the shape. Now the way to activate alpha lock in Procreate is super easy. You just take 2 fingers and you swipe your layer towards the right. Now if that's not working for you, if you don't see this little checkered pattern appear behind your layer, you can just tap on the layer, open the layer menu, and then select Alpha Lock in the list right here. Now Alpha Lock is available in most software, so you should be able to find it in yours as well. But if you can't, it's really not the end of the world. You're just going to have to be a little bit more careful to stay within the lines when you add those markings and those shadows. That being said though, again, I'm just going to color pick here my white that I use for the pages, which is also right here in the color palette in the Sleepy Cat column. And I'm going to pick a brush that has a little bit of texture within it. So that could be, if you're working with a different software, a brush that has pencil in the name, or maybe charcoal. That could work really well as well. If you're working with free Procreate brushes, you could just stick with the sketching brush you use, so the HB pencil, or you could go for a charcoal brush like the one in the charcoals pack that come with the app. I like the willow charcoal. They could probably all work really well, but willow charcoal is my favorite. But if you are working with my illustration bundle in the texture pack, I'm really just going to pick the everything brush from now on, because I feel like it's a perfect blend between a pencil and a charcoal. Now all of that to say, now that I have Alpha Lock activated my white, I'm just going to come over and quickly color in the different elements that I want to have white on. So in my case, it's going to be the cheeks. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and let me know in the comments below what your cat is resting on. So in my case, I would just leave a comment with the word book. Now, if you're a little bit confused with what is this secret password thing, it's a game that we play here in all of my long form step-by-step illustration tutorials. I hide a word or a question for you to find and then leave in the comments below. And that does a few things, but the most important thing is that it does give me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better, which, believe it or not, helps me create better tutorials for you. So again, if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and leave me a comment letting me know what your cat is resting on, and then we're going to keep going. So super simple, but already it's starting to look a little bit more interesting. Now to go even further down the road of making it more interesting, I'm going to add some little stripes on my cat. And for that, I'm really just going to pick a slightly darker version of my base color. So I'm not going to add that in the color palette because I want you to be able to test it out or fill it out depending on what is your base color. So you could just color pick the color you use for your cat and then make that slightly darker. So you can see the kind of difference I'm doing here. It's not a huge difference. It's just enough so that we can actually see those stripes. So I'm going to add 3 stripes on the head, a longer one in the middle, and then 2 shorter ones on the sides. I might also make the top of the ears that kind of darker gray. It's not a shadow, but just like the fur was a little bit darker there. Otherwise, I'm going to add some stripes on the back. And if you are working with my everything brush, you're going to notice if you have a pencil that has tilt sensitivity, if you tilt your pencil on the side, it's going to act more like a big charcoal brush. But if you hold your pencil straight, it's going to act like a pencil brush. So that's what I meant with it kind of is a blend of both, depending on how you're drawing. Just like if you were to draw with a normal coloring pencil and paper, the pencil is going to react. So I just love that. I really love having the opportunity to do both and just get that more, traditional experience when I'm drawing. And I'm also going to add some stripes at the bottom of the tail, probably 3, a thicker one kind of here, and then 2 slightly thinner ones. So once more, this is a good time to pause the video if you want to customize your cat more. Otherwise, I'm going to jump straight into adding some shadows, because right now, if I was to hide the sketch, it still looks like just a very flat blob. So by adding shadows, we're going to be able to create the differentiation between the different parts of the cat. So speaking of shadows and sketch, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to bring back my sketch because I want to see what I'm about to draw, but I'm going to lower the opacity quite a lot so it's barely visible. In your case, it's probably already there, but mine was still a little bit more opaque so you could see when I was tracing my silhouettes. But otherwise, still on the cat layer, I'm going to pick this time quite a darker version of my base color. So we want something significantly darker than the stripes. So let's say here I go ahead and I color pick my base gray. I'm going to this time make it quite a bit darker. Not fully black, but just significantly darker, as you can see. The exact amount of the darkness you're adding doesn't matter. You can be the judge, of course, but we want to be able to really use that to crisp up the piece. Otherwise, I'm going to stick with the same brush, and what I'm going to start to do is just outlining essentially the different body parts I have, and then I'm going to come back in and create gradients so that these outlines don't look like outlines but look like shadows instead. So what I mean, for example, here is I'm going to outline the shape of the head. And when I say outline here, I'm really going with this kind of sketch-like lines, meaning I have a bunch of little rough lines versus one super clean line. And that's just something I like to do in my style, and I think it really helps the feel of something a little bit more traditional rather than digital. So that's also something you can play with if you want. Otherwise, yes, I'm just going to come back in and also roughly, or not roughly, but quickly outline the top of the paw here, then this cheek, the ears, or at least the top of the head where it connects with the ears. Maybe adding a bit of a triangle in there, for the kind of cartoonish ear opening. I'm going to outline this paw and the hip, or the thigh, however you want to call that. And then when the tail kind of overlaps with this foot right here. So the idea here is really just making sure that we have all the information we need so that we can come back in and hide the sketch and still see, okay, this is where the head ends, this is where the paw starts, and all of that. Now, once you do have those outlines, I guess you can always come back in and either use more of a charcoal brush or just tilting your pencil if you have my brushes, and starting with those outlines, using them as edges to create a gradient to create your shadows. So the side of the head here, obviously I would not create a shadow that comes in the head because that makes no sense. I would create a shadow that goes on the body. So really quick, super easy, just like that. Same thing here. There we go. And we're probably going to have a shadow on the bottom of the paw as well. Or below the head, I should say, onto the paw, kind of like this. On the bottom of the ears. I'm showing you really quickly here, just kind of doing an overview, but obviously you can take a little bit more time to work on those gradients. I'm going to fill in the ear triangles. Also add a gradient onto the body, so not onto the hip, but really the body itself. The bottom of this front leg. And then this bottom of the back leg, where it kind of meets with the tail as well. And maybe a tiny little bit above this paw here, kind of on the bottom of the face. Not too intense, but that might help a little bit as well. So again, I went really quickly. Please take a little bit more time to do it on your own piece, just so everything is soft. But if you're struggling to make those gradients soft, you can always come back in with the original base color, and then using the same technique to smoothen your gradients. So again, just using a charcoal brush or tilting your pencil, and then this time, whenever you have a shadow, coming back in to smooth that edge with the lighter color. So you can see the difference here. That's a harsher shadow than this, now that I tweaked my gradient. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to work on the shadows on your cat. And once you're ready, we're going to move on to pretty much doing the same thing, but on the books. So here we're really just going to repeat the same steps we used on the cat to add those details and shadows, but this time on the books and the cup. So we're going to start with book 1. I'm going to show you a quick example once more, making sure we activate Alpha Lock on that layer if it is available in your software. And then we're just going to pick a darker version of the base color. Not too much darker, just a little bit. And we are going to start by outlining the different elements. So here in my case, or if you have books in our case, we're going to start by mapping out the spine. So we should just have a horizontal line right here. And honestly, that's pretty much it in the case of the outlines. Otherwise, we're going to just add some basic shadows. You could here go ahead and do kind of like what we did for the cat, so adding a gradient below this line. In the case of these books, because I'm going to come back in and draw the title, I actually like having this as a crisp line, so I'm going to leave it as is, but I'm going to add a shadow under the cat so it looks like the cat is resting on the book. So that just means going in and adding a shadow really just under the cat shape itself. Making sure you don't forget to add one in the back as well. Just like this. And if you want, you could also add shadows on the thickness of the cover. So kind of one line here. And then one. You could fill in your little triangle there. And maybe add in line as well. Now we're also going to add, if the tail of your cat at least is kind of flopping over the books, we're also going to add a bit of a shadow on the spine of the book. So following the same curvature if you have a curvature, otherwise having a straight line. just like that. Now you could keep it like that, but because the books so far are pretty flat, you could always come in essentially with a slightly darker version of your shadows to amp up some of the shadows. So just making it a little bit darker. And coming in what would be kind of nooks and crannies. So probably here and behind the tail and right behind the face. Now we're also going to add some shadows on the paper, so just color picking the base grayish white we have here, making it a little bit darker. And just adding a shadow here essentially on the top. Very simple, very subtle, but still makes a difference. So I'm going to repeat this on the other two books. I'm going to keep my video going in the background so you can use it as a reference, of course, but I'm going to stop talking to let you focus on drawing your own shadows. Great, now the cup is going to be super easy. We're going to use the same technique but with different shapes, of course. So we can go ahead and activate alpha lock on the cup layer as well. Can color pick the cup. And this time we're going to make it a little bit darker than what we did for the pages, just to make sure we can actually see the volume of the cup well. So probably something like this. Yeah, again, nothing super precise, but quite a bit darker. Now if you want, you could go ahead and reactivate your sketch here because we have a few shapes to look at. We're going to start by outlining, again, the different elements we have, so the bottom of the cup to separate it from the plate. Maybe the side of the handle where it connects with the cup, we can outline that as well. And definitely here, the opening at the top of the cup. Otherwise, we're going to just hide the sketch once more and create some gradients. So I'm going to create a really soft gradient going towards the right onto the handle. I'm going to not create a gradient on the plate because I want it to look like the plate has a bit of a ring on the edges. So I'm going to draw just a smaller oval in the middle of that big one. So it's going to look kind of like this, essentially. And then I'm going to fill that in to shade that in. I might also add a gradient on the left side of the plate though, just because it would be behind the books. So just kind of like this, super simple. And I'm definitely going to add a crescent moon shape on the left side of the cup to make it look like it's not flat, but instead curving away from us. So very simple, something kind of like this. Now the opening, you could leave it like that, or you could add also a bit of a gradient on the left, although when we do add the liquid, we're not going to see that much of that opening anymore, so you don't need to spend too much time on it. Now one thing I'm noticing here though, by doing that, by adding my top of the opening, or bottom of the opening, I should say, outline here, I think the top is just way too curvy, so I'm just going to come back in on my cup layer and fix that silhouette really quickly. So just going back to a hard brush instead of a soft brush. and just cleaning up my lines. Now, before we move on to the details like the facial features, the tea itself, and stuff like that, I do want to show you one quick trick that you can use to add a little bit more, I don't know, interest to the different basic shapes. Because they are so flat, sometimes adding something like a gradient can really completely transform the piece. It's super subtle, it's super quick, but that's one of my favorite tricks. So I'm going to show you how you could do that by using the cat. So I'm just going to go back on the cat layer. And so essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to create a gradient onto the shape by having a selection, creating a gradient within the selection, and then applying a color filter to that selection only. So I'm going to add a gradient on the top of the cat. So I'm going to use my selection tool here, making sure it is still set to freehand so that I can draw whatever I want, and also making sure it is not set to color fill. Otherwise, it's going to fill in my selection, which is really not what I want. I just want to be able to draw a section. So I'm going to draw that section again, kind of on the top of the cat, and I'm going to make sure it's a little bit wobbly. I don't want just a straight line. And I'm going to close that selection. And I'm going to use the feather option right here so that I can have a gradient in the edge of the selection instead of just a straight line. So I'm just going to like feather here, and the amount of feather is totally up to you. It's probably going to be around 20-30% depending on the size of the canvas you're using as well as just what you're working on. So here I'm just going to go with around, I don't know, let's go with 25. The exact number really doesn't matter. You just want to have a gradient instead of a harsh line. And then from there you can go back to your adjustment panel, hue, saturation, and brightness. And you can lift the brightness, for example, to create a lighter top on your silhouette. So you can see it's a very quick tool, or technique I should say, but it completely transforms the piece. So another example could be adding a gradient on the book. So that would not necessarily be realistic, but I still think it's a really great way of amping up your piece and bringing it up to the next level. So let's say I go with the book 1. This time I could select the right section of the book. Again, a kind of a blob selection. Add some feathering to my selection, probably around, I don't know, 30% this time. Again, just kind of getting a feel for it. And applying a color filter to that selection. So adjustment panel, hue, saturation, and brightness. And this time I'm going to play with the hue. So maybe I want the bottom of the book, well, the right side of the book, but if the book was up, it would be the bottom. Maybe I want that to be more teal than just blue. So I could play with the hue and change that real quickly. So once more, it's kind of subtle, but if I was to undo, you can see it does add a lot to the piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that on the other books really quickly. Like as you can see, once you know the steps, it is super, super quick. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to add extra gradients, extra shadows, whatever you want. And once you're done with that, we're going to meet up in the final chapter, which is going to be adding some details and really just taking this piece and making it look the best it can. Okay, so at this stage we're almost done, but all we do here is going to completely transform everything. So I highly encourage you to just stick around until the end. We're almost there. The first thing I'm going to do is just add some details on the cat, mostly the facial features, because right now it's definitely lacking. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new layer above the cat, and I'm going to rename that new layer to Cat Details. Now I do like to create those details on a separate layer so that I can move them around if needed, because stuff like facial features is just so important in illustration. It's always good to be able to come back in, move them around if needed without having to, for example, erase and then redraw the colors underneath and stuff like that. So here I'm going to stick with the same everything brush that I've been using, but if you've been working with free Procreate brushes or a different software, you would probably want to switch from a charcoal brush to a pencil brush, similar to the one they use for the sketch, just so you have a little bit more control over those details. Again, in my case here, I'm just going to keep my everything brush, but I'm going to draw with my pencil more upright than tilted to the side. So for the facial features, I'm just going to go with a super, super, super dark gray. In the color palette, it is this one right here. It's not quite black because I really try to avoid using pure blacks in my illustration. I just feel like that's part of my style, I guess. So I'm going to go with, yes, this super dark gray. And I'm going to reactivate my sketch so that I see what I'm doing, of course. But then we pretty much have everything, so it's super easy. Just go over and draw those facial features. I might just darken these ear triangles. And I might also add some whiskers, so just 3 whiskers, starting with a longer one at the top and then just going towards a shorter one at the bottom. And maybe also adding some little fingers on my paws, so just 3 very simple curvy lines, kind of like this. Or 2, I should say, but those create 3 fingers. Anyway. Great. Now I'm also going to add some tiny little dots on the cat using a very light version, a very pale version, I should say, of my base color. So I'm going to select towards the top because this is where I have the lighter part of the gradient. And I'm going to make it a little bit paler. And I'm just going to see wherever it's really flat, for example, the top of the tie here, and I'm going to add some super simple little dots like this. Again, nothing realistic in any way, but this is part of my style, and I think it really helps the piece look a little bit more interesting, and a little bit more polished and professional. And you can go ahead and deactivate your sketch to make sure everything is exactly how you want it to be. I feel like the nose and the mouth are a little bit too big, so not a problem. Because I have all those details on a separate layer, I can just come in with my selection tool, select that area, and then just make them smaller and reposition them as desired. Now we're also going to add details on the book and the cup, but before that, otherwise I'm going to forget, we're also going to add a shadow under everything. So just go ahead and create a new layer below everything you have except for the background and the wall shadow, and rename that new layer to ground shadow. Now that shadow is going to be the same color as the one you used on the wall, so you can just color pick that or pick it in the color palette. It was this one, this color right here. And using either a charcoal brush or again just the everything brush but tilted to the side, you're going to paint a shadow under the books and under the cup. So again, probably quite hard to see, but if I was to go ahead and hide my background, or make it white I should say, this kind of region right here. Now the details you add on the books are totally optional. Of course you could just keep the books like that, but I'm going to draw some, or I'm going to write some funny titles, and I'm going to write them on just one layer above all the books that I'm going to rename to Books Details. And for that I'm just going to pick the darker color that I used on each book, make it a little tiny bit darker. Not a whole lot, just a little bit more. Making sure my brush is small, and I'm really just going to write the title and maybe adding some little lines as well. just as decorations on the spine. And finally, the details on the tea are probably the most important because right now it just looks like an empty cup, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I want it to look like tea or hot chocolate. So I'm just going to create a new layer above the cup layer, renaming that to cup details. And I'm going to come in with a nice brown. So in the color palette, I'm going to pick this one right here. So just a very simple curve like this. Then quickly filling that in. Maybe if I want to be, very much a perfectionist, I could come in with a slightly darker version of that brown and creating a gradient on the left side. There we go. And I'm also going to add the tag. Now, I could go ahead and reactivate my sketch, but I'm just going to freehand it. Why not? I'm going to pick darker version I used for my writing here on that yellow book. And I'm going to use that for the string. And then I'm going to come in with the medium version. I'm going to draw the tag itself. Manually filling it in so that I have some nice textures. And I'm going to add a little tiny border with the lighter version of that yellow. Just like that. So if you enjoyed this video and want to learn how to animate your cat, make sure to go ahead and check the part 2 of this video in which we're going to do the animation. Trust me, it is really quite simple. Even if you've never animated anything before, you can definitely follow along the instructions. That being said, if you're not a fan of animation, go ahead and check out this playlist right here in which I have a bunch more animal drawing tutorials for you. But before we leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I post every Saturday with some bonus videos on Tuesdays. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.